So you want to own a golf course. Golf just posted its best participation numbers in decades. More than 42 million players in 2024, up 38% since 2019. The industry moves over $100 billion a year in economic activity. Sounds like one of the safest bets in leisure real estate. It isn't. The average course spends around $800,000 a year just to keep the grass alive before a single green fee gets collected. Stick around and you'll see why the golf course itself, the part everyone assumes is the business, is often the least profitable piece of the whole operation. You'll also see the one hidden mechanism, buried in water contracts and drought law, that can take the entire asset away from an owner who never did anything wrong. This isn't a story about bad management or one lucky season. It's about what you're actually buying when you sign the deed and what you don't control once you do. Golf looks like the product here. In a lot of cases, it's closer to the packaging, and the real transaction is happening somewhere else entirely. That gap between assumption and reality is where the whole industry lives, and it starts the moment you try to buy in. Start with what it costs to buy one. Golf course sale prices run anywhere from about $2 million up to $269 million, the number attached to Trump National Golf Links. Most deals land nowhere near either extreme. Data tracked by Leisure Investment Properties Group puts the average sale price at around $3.1 million, which sounds almost reasonable until you look at what that number is actually buying you. That average hides enormous regional swings. Of course, in a coastal state like California, Florida, or the Carolinas usually carries a much higher price tag because tourists and retirees both want to be near the ocean. And that demand shows up in the land value long before it shows up in the golf. Water rights get more expensive and more tightly regulated in those same high-demand states. And if the land carries environmental restrictions, a protected species, or any history of contamination, the deal gets slower, more complicated, and more expensive to close, sometimes stalling out before it ever reaches the appraisal stage. Appraisers in this industry also value courses by the hole, and that rule of thumb runs between $150,000 and $400,000 per hole for a turnkey purchase. An average 18-hole course priced in the middle of that range is already a multi-million-dollar commitment before a single blade of grass gets cut. Buyers and lenders also look at the deal through a cash flow multiple, and golf courses generally trade at 4 to 7 times their annual earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Struggling municipal or public courses sell closer to 3 or 4 times earnings. High-end resort courses and well-run private clubs can reach 6 to 8 times because their income is considered more stable and more repeatable. None of that's the real number though. The real number shows up every year whether you sold a single round or not. Maintenance data compiled by the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America and reported by golf.com breaks spending down by course type. Municipal courses average around $621,000 a year. Semi-private courses average about $567,000. Daily fee public courses average roughly $556,000. Private clubs, which hold the highest conditioning standards, average over $1,083,000 a year, nearly double the public course figure. Across all course types combined, the average lands around $810,000 annually. A separate industry estimate lands in almost the same place, putting average annual maintenance at about $800,000, with roughly $460,000 of that going to labor alone. Push into resort tier conditioning, with heavier landscaping, more fertilizer, more advanced irrigation, dedicated equipment, and a full pest control program, and that annual number can climb past $3 million. And that's just the ground. It doesn't include insurance, a cart fleet, a clubhouse that has to stay presentable, a pro shop stacked with inventory, or the working capital to cover payroll through a slow, rainy month. Lenders underwriting these deals price all of it in, which is part of why the cash flow multiple shrinks so fast for a course that can't prove it survives a bad season. You haven't opened the doors yet, and you've already committed millions to the purchase and hundreds of thousands a year just to keep the turf alive. So the real question isn't whether you can afford to buy a golf course. It's whether the way it actually makes money can cover what you just signed up for. So once you've written that check, here's how you start making some of it back. For a typical daily fee course, it starts with green fees and cart fees. And together those two line items make up somewhere between 55 and 70% of total revenue. Cart fees alone typically add another $15 to $25 per rider, per round, stacked on top of the green fee. That's the core transaction, pay to play, then pay again to ride. Food and beverage is the second major stream, and it's a bigger number than most people expect. A busy daily fee course can pull in $300,000 to $600,000 a year from its bar, restaurant, and halfway house combined. But that's a gross figure, not a profit figure. Running a kitchen and a bar means labor costs, spoilage, health code compliance, and staffing an operation that's often only busy for a few hours around midday. The revenue looks good on the top line and gets expensive fast underneath it. Operators track all of this through a metric called average revenue per round, or ARPR, which is exactly what it sounds like. Total revenue, from green fees to carts to food to merchandise, divided by the number of rounds played. It's the single number that tells an owner whether their pricing and their extras are pulling their weight, or whether the course is just moving a lot of golfers through for not very much money each. Driving ranges and instruction add a third layer, and courses that invest in ball tracking technology and automated ball pickers are betting that a better range experience pulls in both golfers and non-golfers during slow day parts. That's advisory guidance from industry consultants rather than a hard published number, so treat it as a lever operator's pool, not a guaranteed return. There's also real disagreement inside the industry about how public courses should price themselves. One prominent industry critic argues that the traditional pile of discount cards, senior rates, and twilight deals has broken the economics of the average public course entirely, and that operators would do better switching to dynamic pricing software that adjusts green fees automatically based on real-time demand. Not everyone agrees with that take, but it points at the same tension every operator faces: reward the loyal golfer with a lower price, or capture full value on a Saturday morning tee time that's going to sell either way. Private clubs run on a completely different engine. Instead of charging per round, they collect recurring dues plus an upfront initiation fee just to join the roster. Some clubs structure that initiation fee as a non-equity payment, so it buys access and nothing else, and the club keeps the money even after a member eventually leaves. Other clubs sell equity memberships, where the fee behaves more like a share in the club itself, sometimes refundable, sometimes transferable, occasionally appreciating in value if demand for that roster stays strong. Well-run clubs also lean on what the industry calls ancillary revenue, everything outside the core dues and green fees, and the rule of thumb is that this should make up 25 to 40% of total revenue for a properly diversified operation. That's a meaningful chunk of the business that has nothing to do with anyone actually swinging a club that day. Here's the number that exposes which of these two models the market trusts more. Public and resort courses typically sell for somewhere between 3/10 and 6/10 of their annual revenue. Private, member-owned clubs with a stable base of dues-paying members sell for 7/10 to 1.2 times revenue, almost double. Buyers aren't paying more because the golf is better on those courses. They're paying more because a dues-paying membership behaves like a subscription, arriving every month whether it rains or not, while a green fee is a one-time transaction that depends entirely on someone showing up that day. That gap in what buyers will pay is the whole story compressed into one number. It's telling you, in plain financial terms, which version of this business the market actually believes in. So here's the reframe, and it's the one that explains everything else. On a lot of private clubs, you're not buying a golf business with a social scene attached. You're buying a private social network that happens to use 18 holes of manicured grass as its entry fee. Look at how these clubs are actually structured. A large share of private country clubs operate as tax-exempt social organizations, and the people running them make a deliberate choice. The golf course, the dining room, and the pool all get run at a structural loss on purpose. That loss isn't a failure of management. It's the cost of maintaining the thing that actually generates the club's revenue, which is the prestige of being on the membership roster in the first place. The course and the clubhouse exist to make the dues and the initiation fee feel worth paying. Put a number on the membership itself and the picture gets clearer. Industry valuations put the worth of an individual membership somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 per active member, and clubs holding a waitlist or a legacy membership passed down through a family can push that figure past $6,000 a person. Multiply that across a club with several hundred members, and you start to see where the real balance sheet value is sitting, and it isn't sitting on the golf course. That per member number cuts both ways though. A club that keeps its waitlist full and its membership renewing sees that $6,000 figure hold or climb. A club that starts losing members doesn't just lose the monthly dues check, it loses the multiplier that made the whole membership base worth anything in the first place. And both effects hit the balance sheet at the same time in the same direction. That's what actually explains the valuation gap from a moment ago. Buyers pay 0.7 to 1.2 times revenue for a private club, nearly double what they'll pay for a public course, because they're not really pricing the golf operation. They're pricing a recurring dues-paying membership base that renews itself year after year, the same way you'd price a subscription business rather than a seasonal recreation service. So the diligence changes too. A buyer evaluating a public course is underwriting golfer traffic, weather patterns, and how well the food and beverage operation is run. A buyer evaluating a private club is underwriting a membership organization instead. Renewal rates, the depth of any waitlist, the average age of the membership base, and how much of the capital plan is funded through initiation fees rather than new debt. Two different diligence processes wearing the exact same 18-hole disguise. That same logic is why an established private club with decades of history is worth so much more than a brand new one built with identical physical amenities. The land, the grass, and the clubhouse can be replicated in 18 months by anyone with enough capital. The membership roster, the waitlist, and the reputation behind it usually can't be. A buyer in that deal is purchasing decades of accumulated social trust a new competitor can't build overnight, no matter how much they spend on landscaping. So the golf course isn't the product being sold, it's the packaging the product comes in. The membership roster is the product, and the 18 holes, the dining room, and the pro shop are the presentation that makes people willing to pay to be on that roster. That model works, and it works well, right up until the one input holding all that grass together stops showing up on schedule. An 18-hole course can burn through millions of gallons of water a month just on irrigation, and in a lot of cases, the legal right to that water isn't something the golf course owns outright. It's leased, shared with a neighboring property, or contingent on a contract that can be reinterpreted the moment conditions turn difficult. In many states, water rights are allocated by permit and by seniority rather than by property line, which means owning the land underneath the golf course isn't the same as owning a guaranteed permanent right to water it. Standard title insurance protects your ownership of the land itself. It doesn't typically guarantee a permanent, unshakable right to the water that keeps everything on the land alive. Look at what happened on Maui. TY Management Corp., the company that operates the Kapalua golf courses, sued its own water supplier, Maui Land and Pineapple Company, in August 2025, claiming the supplier had let its irrigation system fall apart and left the courses without enough water to function. Buried in a 2010 contract between the two companies was a clause that mattered more than either side probably expected going in. During a drought, the supplier's potable drinking water needs come first, meaning the water safe enough to actually drink. And the golf courses only get whatever non-potable water, the lower grade water used for irrigation rather than taps, happens to be left over. Then the drought got worse. Tier 4 restrictions kicked in, requiring a full 100% cut to non-potable water use across the region. The Kapalua courses kept irrigating anyway, using more than 11.4 million gallons in a single month, nearly 7 million of that at the Plantation course alone. That drew an emergency legal challenge from the environmental group Earth Justice, demanding the State Water Commission force the courses to stop pulling from the drinking water supply entirely. The consequence landed fast. The PGA Tour's Century Tournament had been held at the Plantation Course for 27 straight years.
A hot, dry summer is turning many of Hawaii's green golf courses brown.
And it was worth an estimated $50 million to the local economy every time it ran. Because of the water situation,
the PGA Tour has canceled the Century Tournament of Champions at Kapalua Resort in January.
The tour pulled the tournament from its January schedule. This isn't a one-state problem either. In Montana, state regulators sued Crazy Mountain Ranch in 2025, arguing the resort never actually held a valid water right for the 112-acre golf course it started building back in 2023. Montana law allows fines of up to $1,000 a day against anyone irrigating without a valid right, a bill that adds up fast on a course that size, and one that keeps adding up for every day the dispute drags on. And these aren't really stories about two unlucky courses. Hawaii ties golf course water to a negotiated contract and a drought priority clause. Montana ties it to a permit and a seniority date. Different legal systems, same outcome. The water arrives because someone else made a decision, not because the golf course owner has any certainty built into the deed. Any course sitting in one of these water-stressed regions is exposed to some version of the same fight, whether it eventually shows up in a courtroom, a regulator's office, or a supplier's renegotiated contract. Here's the part that matters if you're the one signing the purchase agreement. The clubhouse, the membership roster, and every acre of visible turf can all be yours outright, and the water underneath is still a different story. That right can sit inside someone else's contract, someone else's drought policy, or a regulator's finding that it was never valid to begin with. A deed transfers the land. It doesn't automatically transfer a guaranteed right to keep watering what's growing on it. You bought the golf course. You didn't necessarily buy the water that keeps it alive. And even where the water holds, there's a bigger force working against the average golf course owner right now, and it has nothing to do with rainfall. Institutional capital has been consolidating this industry aggressively. In 2026, KSL Capital Partners closed its acquisition of Invited Clubs, the company formerly known as Club Corp, and the largest private club operator in the country, with more than 150 golf and country clubs under one roof. KSL bought it from Apollo Global Management in a deal reported at somewhere between $2.6 and $3 billion. KSL had actually owned this same company once before, back in 2006, when it bought the business from the Deadman family and eventually took it public in 2013, raising $252 million while keeping a majority stake for itself. Apollo then took the whole thing private again in 2017, paying about $1.1 billion, 30.7% above where the stock had been trading. Ownership of the largest stack of private clubs in America has now changed hands between the same handful of private equity firms multiple times over 20 years, and none of those buyers were in it for the golf itself. KSL and Apollo aren't the only institutional money circling this industry either. Arcis Golf, a smaller operator running about 70 courses, has carried an enterprise value estimated between $1.5 and $2 billion. Topgolf, the entertainment-driven side of the same broader industry, was valued at roughly $1.1 billion in a late 2025 transaction. Every one of these deals is pricing the same underlying asset the same way this video has been describing it: a membership base and a real estate position wrapped in a golf course. That consolidation is happening because a lot of the industry underneath is genuinely struggling. Roughly 1 in 5 golf clubs nationwide is considered financially vulnerable, without reliable access to the capital needed to reinvest in the course, the clubhouse, or the equipment fleet. Without that capital, the options narrow to 2: sell to someone who has it or close. Closing doesn't always mean the story ends there either. In England and Wales, 60 golf clubs shut down between March 2020 and March 2025, and most of them were sold directly to housing developers. In Las Vegas, Desert Pines Golf Club closed after 30 years of operation, and its 95 acres are becoming roughly 1,500 units of housing. And that flips a piece of real estate logic that used to run the opposite way. A golf course view used to add a premium to the homes built around it. Research from John Burns Research and Consulting shows that a defunct or rundown course no longer carries that premium, and homes nearby can actually rise in value once the course gets converted into new housing. In other words, the land underneath a struggling golf course can be worth more without the golf course on it than with it. This is the force sitting underneath the entire industry right now, and it isn't finished playing out. Some of the private equity money moving through golf is betting on the game's genuine participation boom. Some of it's betting on the real estate underneath the fairways, treating the golf course as a placeholder until the land is worth more as something else entirely. Both bets get placed on the exact same courses at the same time, and from the outside, they look identical. Pull all of it together, and a golf course is never really one business, no matter how the listing describes it. It's three separate bets stacked on top of each other and sold as a single package. There's the operating business, selling rounds, carts, and food to whoever shows up that day. There's the membership business, selling access and status to a roster of dues-paying members, closer to a subscription than a round of golf. And there's the real estate underneath all of it, whose value might have nothing to do with golf at all. Which of those three bets actually wins gets decided long before the grass is cut for the first time. It's decided in the purchase agreement, in who actually holds the water rights, in whether the membership base is growing or aging out, and in whether the land underneath the fairways is worth more with the course sitting on it or without it. Every number in this video, the entry cost, the maintenance bill, the revenue split, the valuation gap, is really just a different angle on that same question. A golf course can be a genuinely good business. The participation numbers back that up, and so does the $100 billion industry sitting around it. But the version most buyers imagine when they picture owning one, a quiet, grassy, recession-proof lifestyle asset, is rarely the version that actually gets built, financed, and fought over in court. That's also the pattern worth carrying into any other business that looks simple from the outside. A gas station isn't really about fuel. A zoo isn't really about the animals people pay to see. And a golf course isn't really about golf. Every one of these has a real machine humming underneath the version the public sees, and the owner ends up responsible for whichever version turns out to be true. You decide which of those three businesses you'd actually be signing up for.